In 1934, a carpenter named Elmer Wexford in Logan County, West Virginia, patched a 4-foot crack in a plaster ceiling using horsehair from his own mare, a bucket of lime he slaked himself, and a trowel he carved from a busted axe handle. That repair held above his children's beds for 51 years. When the house was torn down in 1985, his grandson stood in the rubble and could not find the seam. The man who could find it had been dead 9 years. He never wrote it down. They fixed everything. Not as a hobby, as the only response a self-respecting person had to a broken thing in their own home. A leaking faucet was not a phone call. A cracked window was not a quote from a contractor. We did not lose those skills because they stopped working. We lost them because an entire economy was built on convincing us our hands were not enough. The people who carried the knowledge are dying faster than anyone is writing it down. Number 22 stopped a kitchen leak in 4 minutes using something cut from an old leather belt. Number 14 held together a sash window for 60 years with nothing but cotton rope and a piece of cast iron from a junk pile. And number 2, the single repair that kept more plaster ceilings standing through the 1930s than any product on the market today, was done with a handful of animal hair, a bucket of lime, and a knowledge that has been almost completely erased from the trades. These 25 tricks were not handyman work. They were the daily vocabulary of people who would sooner go without than ask for help. That vocabulary is nearly extinct. The hands that spoke it are in nursing homes and graveyards now, and what they knew is going with them. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 25 lost handyman tricks from the Great Depression that old-timers took to the grave. Number 25, straightening bent nails. No depression. Carpenter threw away a nail. You laid it flat against an anvil or the back of a shovel, tapped it with light blows, rotating a quarter turn between strikes until the shaft ran true. You kept them in a coffee can on the bench. For a father with 3 sons and a leaking roof in 1933, that can was the difference between fixing what broke and watching it get worse. A refusal to be defeated by something as small as a bent piece of metal. Number 24, whitewash from lime and salt. You slaked quicklime in a wooden bucket the night before, stirring until it stopped hissing. The next morning you added water and table salt to make it stick. You brushed it on with horsehair. 2 coats covered a chicken coop, a fence, the inside of a root cellar. The barn down the road in 1936 had been whitewashed every spring for 40 years by the same hands. Those walls outlasted the man who painted them. A chemistry lesson done with 2 ingredients and a bucket. Number 23. Patching a leaky roof with tar and a feed sack. You found the wet spot from inside first, then drove a nail up through the deck to find it from the top. You cut a square of burlap, dipped it in tar warmed on a coal stove, and laid it over the hole like a poultice. A second coat sealed the edges. A man in 1937, on a tin roof house in eastern Kentucky, kept his family dry through 12 winters with 1 sack and 1 bucket. The patch was ugly. It held. Number 22, faucet washer cut from an old belt. You took a worn belt, found a section without cracks, and cut a disc the diameter of the valve seat with a pocket knife. You unscrewed the packing nut, peeled off the ruined washer, pressed the leather circle into its place, and tightened it back down. The drip stopped before you finished cleaning your tools. For a Pennsylvania mill widow in 1935, 4 minutes of work saved her a half-day's wages. A 5-cent piece of belt held back a plumber's invoice. Number 21, re-gluing a chair joint with a matchstick. You found the loose rung and worked the joint apart. You ran a wooden matchstick through hot hide glue and pushed it into the dowel hole alongside the loose tenon, pressed the joint back together, left it overnight under a clamp of twine and a stick of wood. A Brooklyn tailor in 1934 kept 4 kitchen chairs working for 2 decades with a matchstick jar and a glue pot. He never bought a chair after his wedding day. The chairs were not the point. The refusal to let them fail was. Number 20, sharpening a hand saw with a 3-cornered file. You set the saw teeth up in a wooden vise. You ran a 3-cornered file across each tooth at the angle the maker had set, every other tooth one way. Then you flipped it and did the alternate teeth from the other side. You finished by setting the teeth with a saw set. Every carpenter in 1936 sharpened his own. Most carpenters today cannot. The file is still made. The hands that knew how to hold it are not. Number 19, patching window screen with thread and shellac. You laid a square of screen over the tear and stitched it to the original mesh with cotton thread in an overcast stitch. You brushed it with thin shellac to stiffen the thread and stop the cut edges from fraying. The repair was nearly invisible from 3 feet. For a mother in rural Indiana in 1938, flies in the kitchen meant disease in the children. The screen did not need to be pretty. It worked for 11 more years. Number 18, wood filler from sawdust and hide glue. You swept fine sawdust from under the saw bench, matching it to the species you were patching. You mixed it with hot hide glue to a thick paste, pressed it into the gouge with a putty knife and your thumb. When it dried, it sanded flat and took stain almost like solid wood. A Chicago furniture refinisher in 1935 fixed gouged tabletops for a living using a coffee can of mixed sawdust by species, each labeled in pencil. The economy stopped paying for it. There are men alive right now who were taught to repair plaster by their grandfathers in the 1940s. They are 88, 89, 90. They can mix lime putty by feel. They can hear by sound whether a wall is keyed properly. When the last of them dies, that work will be done by no one. The information is in books. The instinct is not. It lived in the man's fingertips and the way he stood at a wall. We are not building anything that will replace it. Number 17, freeing a stuck window with a wax candle. You scored the painted seam where the sash met the stop. You worked it loose with a putty knife. Once it moved, you ran a wax candle up and down the inside channel until the wood took on a thin shine. The sash glided where it had been welded shut by 20 years of paint. A landlady in Boston in 1939 kept a stub of beeswax in her apron pocket for exactly this purpose. The window was not broken. It had forgotten how to move. Wax remembered for it. Number 16, recording a sash window with cotton rope. You pried off the inside stop, lifted the sash, cut the old cord, and fished out the cast iron weight from its pocket inside the jamb. You threaded new cotton sash cord over the pulley using a small nail as a fish weight. You tied a bowline to the weight and a figure 8 to the sash. That cord lasted 60 years. The men who could thread one in 30 minutes are nearly gone. The pulleys are still in the walls. Number 15, rehandling a hammer with hickory and a wedge. When the handle split, you bought a hickory replacement for 15 cents, or shaped one from a green branch with a draw knife. You knocked the old wood out of the eye. You shaped the new handle until it pressed firmly into the head, then drove a wooden wedge down the center to expand the wood against the steel. A metal cross wedge locked it for good. A factory replacement today costs more than a new hammer. Not progress. Design. Number 14. Reseating a loose hinge with a matchstick. Old door hinges pull loose because the wood inside the screw hole has crushed. You removed the screw. You dipped 2 or 3 wooden matches in glue, broke them off, packed them tight into the empty hole. You drove the screw back in over the matchsticks. The wood swelled, the threads bit, the hinge held tight. A bricklayer in 1934 fixed every loose door in a tenement using 1 box of kitchen matches. He fixed the hole the hinge could not fix itself. Number 13. Patching plaster with lime, sand, and horsehair. 3-coat plaster was standard in every house built before 1940. When a crack opened, you raked it out with a knife and wet the lath behind it. You troweled in a scratch coat of lime, sand, and short animal hair and let it key into the wooden lath beneath. A brown coat went on next, scratched with a comb to grip the finish. A thin finish coat was floated smooth. It outlasted everyone in the house. The horsehair was structural fiber, the way rebar is in concrete today. They used hair from the same animal that pulled the wagon. It held 100 years. Number 12. Sealing a cracked stove with cement and wood ash. Every Depression kitchen had a cast iron range, and every range eventually cracked. You mixed commercial furnace cement with a small amount of fine wood ash from the firebox. You worked the mixture into the crack with a putty knife and let the next fire cure it. The repair turned to ceramic under heat. A coal country housewife in 1935 cooked 3 meals a day on a stove she had patched 7 times. It was being kept alive by a woman who refused to surrender it. Number 11. Splicing a frayed cord with rubber tape and shellac. When the cloth-covered cord on a lamp or iron began to fray, you cut out the bad section, stripped a 1/2 inch from each end, twisted the copper strands together by hand, and wrapped the joint in rubber friction tape. A coat of shellac sealed the wrap against moisture. Every household in 1937 contained at least 1 cord like it. The same repair today requires a wire nut, a heat shrink tube, and a building inspector. The law decided it was dangerous. Number 10. Recaning a chair seat with split rattan. When a woven chair seat broke through, you ordered a coil of split rattan from the Sears catalog for 40 cents. You soaked it in warm water until pliable, then wove it through the holes in the frame, 6 rows of strands in 2 directions, locked with diagonals. A Boston piano teacher in 1938 recaned every chair in her parlor herself, including the one her father had carried from Italy in 1899. She was unwilling to admit that any object in her house was beyond her. In 1934, the average American household spent almost nothing on professional home repair. Not because nothing broke, everything broke. The person who lived in the house fixed it. In 2024, the United States home repair industry generated over $600 billion. That industry depends on a single transaction, you not knowing how to fix a dripping faucet, you not knowing how to reseat a loose hinge with a matchstick. The houses did not get harder to fix. We were taught not to try. Number 9. Wetting a knife on the bottom of a coffee mug. A pocket knife went dull. A grandfather did not own an oil stone in the kitchen. He flipped a coffee mug upside down and ran the blade along the unglazed ceramic ring on the bottom at a low angle, alternating sides, 12 strokes aside. The bevel came back. A boy watching his grandfather do this in 1939 carried the trick into the army, into a factory, and into his own kitchen for 60 years. The assumption that any problem could be solved with what was already in the room. Number 8. Reglazing a window pane with linseed oil putty. The compound that holds glass into a wooden sash is linseed oil and chalk. You scraped out the cracked original with a stiff knife. You ran a thin bead of fresh putty along the glass, pressed it in at a 45-degree angle with the side of the blade, trimming the excess with a single clean pass. A homeowner in 1936 with a broken pane reglazed it himself for the price of one putty knife and a pound of compound. Today, a single pane replacement starts at $300. The willingness to learn it was priced out of the culture. Number 7. Sharpening an axe with a mill file. A dull axe was more dangerous than a sharp one. You clamped the head in a vise and ran a mill file down the bevel on each side at the same angle, taking off only what showed shine. You stropped the edge on belt leather pulled tight, finishing the burr until the blade would shave hair off your forearm. A North Carolina woodcutter in 1934 split 8 cords a season with one axe head he had sharpened for 9 years. The hands that maintained it were not disposable either. Number 6. Patching a copper pipe with solder. A pinhole leak in 1937 was a 40-cent fix. You shut off the water, drained the line, and cleaned the pipe to bright copper with emery cloth. You brushed flux on the joint area. You heated the pipe with a torch and touched a stick of solder to the metal, not the flame. The solder wickeded into the leak by capillary action and froze the pipe back into one piece. A licensed plumber today charges $300 for a service call before he picks up a tool. The permission to touch it now requires a FEE. Number 5. Risoling boots with shoe goo and a tire. When the soles wore through in 1934, you cut a piece of rubber from a worn-out tire, traced the boot bottom with chalk, and cut the shape with a sharp knife. You roughed the boot bottom with sandpaper, coated both surfaces with shoe glue, pressed them together, and clamped them overnight. A Pennsylvania miner in 1935 wore the same pair for 11 years. He risoled them 4 times. The boots were not durable. He was. Number 4. Cleaning rust off iron tools with vinegar. Rust on hand tools was a normal condition, not a death sentence. You submerged the rusted head in a jar of white vinegar overnight. By morning, the rust came off with a stiff wire brush. You wiped the metal dry and rubbed it with a rag dipped in motor oil to prevent flash rust. A Depression-era tool cared for like this lasted 3 generations. A garage sale hammer from 1932 still sells for more than a new one. Both were maintained. Number 3. Caulking a window with rope and putty. Before foam strips and silicone, drafts around old windows were sealed with a strand of cotton rope packed into the gap with a putty knife, then covered with linseed oil putty smoothed over the top. The rope blocked the air. The putty held the rope in place and shed water. A Wisconsin homeowner in 1936 sealed every window this way every fall and pulled the strands out every spring so the sashes could swing open. We pay more now for a result that lasts less. Number 2. Rekeying a sagging plaster ceiling. When the keys on the back of a plaster ceiling broke and the plaster began to bow downward, you did not tear out the ceiling. You pushed the bulge gently back up against the lath, and you drove drywall screws through small perforated metal washers into the joists above, every 6 inches across the failed area, until the plaster was pulled flat and held. A skim coat of joint compound hid the washers. The ceiling that had been about to fall stayed up another 50 years, a refusal to let the house be defeated by gravity. Number 1. Standing in front of the broken thing and deciding it can be repaired. That was the entire skill. Every one of these 24 tricks began with the same moment. A Depression-era father walked up to whatever had broken and did not reach for a phone. He did not reach for a wallet. He looked at the broken thing. He turned it in his hands. He named what was wrong with it. And then he fixed it. That moment of looking before reaching is the missing skill on every list of forgotten knowledge in this country. What was lost was the belief that the thing could be fixed at all. None of these repairs required a certification. None required a credit card. They required a willingness to walk up to a broken thing and believe, without anyone's permission, that you were capable of making it work again. That belief was once the default setting of the American household. Every father had it. Every mother had it. Children watched and absorbed the assumption that this was simply what people did when something went wrong. We did not lose the tools. The tools are still in the basement. We lost the hands that knew what to do with them. And we lost the voice that stood next to us when we were 10 years old and said, "Watch closely, I will only show you once." What they knew has not been written down because what they knew cannot be written down. It lived in their hands. It is leaving with their hands. The only thing that recovers any of it is a person deciding tonight that the next broken thing in the house is not going to be replaced. It is going to be looked at, touched, understood, and fixed. One repair at a time, by hand.